The older I get, the more I realize that my love for Tokusatsu is centered on how well a film or show weaves in practical effects for a variety of genres. Nowadays, it's all about superheroes, but we've got kaiju stories, war films, and even sci-fi blockbusters where the use of dummies, suits, miniatures, puppets, or devices is key for a given IP's appeal. But as you all know, Halloween is upon us and I need an excuse to talk about horror movies. So let's touch on a trilogy that can appeal to anyone with a love for suits or scares. Tonight, let's take a bite into the Bloodthirsty Trilogy. For a lot of us Toku fans, the intersection between the very Western idea of a vampire and the Japanese idea of Tokusatsu filmmaking shows up most often in the Kamen Rider franchise. Whether it's Komori Otoko in the original show, his send-ups across the years, or Kamen Rider Kiva, there's always a bloodsucker waiting around the wings for this series. But as a fan of Castlevania Chronicles on the PS1, I've learned that so much of Japan's love for all things Dracula is thanks to the United Kingdom, more specifically, London's very own Hammer Film Studios. For those of you from the UK, Hammer needs no introduction. Founded in the 1930s, Hammer was known for B-films, dramas, and mysteries. However, its fortunes changed in the 50s thanks to the rabid success of the Quatermass experiment in 1955, followed by the Curse of Frankenstein a few years later. And in order to capitalize on this buzz, Hammer transformed itself from a quickie factory to the world leader in gothic horror films. And the craziest thing is that Hammer still had an ace up its sleeve. And this film became so beloved amongst horror aficionados that its legacy is still felt to this very day. In 1958, Hammer released their interpretation of Bram Stoker's Dracula to international acclaim despite its heavy edits under the British Board of Film Censors. Not only was this the first Dracula film in color, but it's the first one featuring his fangs, his blood-sucking, and his lurid hunger for female flesh. From what I've come to understand, Japanese moviegoers were especially enthralled by the film, and there's a bunch of rumors circling around online to suggest that a longer version of the film exists that was exclusive to Japan. And let's not forget how these films inspired Hitoshi Akamatsu to help create the Castlevania games that we adore today. This is why he called himself Transfissors, which, in my opinion, is either an intentional or incorrect transliteration of the director of the 1958 Hammer Dracula film, Terence Fisher. And to capitalize on Japan's love for Hammer horror, Toho went ahead and made their own spin on the gothic vampire tale. As Kim Newman explains in the trilogy's special features, Japan's first foray with Western vampire films was The Vampire Lady in 1959 from Shin Toho Studios. From the look of the vampire to the gothic set design, the film is very much in the vein of a Hammer production. One tidbit of trivia here is that Shin Toho was formed by former Toho employees who splintered to make their own company in the 1940s. Though they went bankrupt in 1961, Shin Toho's short-lived legacy focused on horror films that included its very last production, Jigoku. With all this in mind, it seems ironic that Toho of all studios picked up where Shin Toho left off, because the first film of the Bloodthirsty Trilogy is peak Hammer. The vampire dolls focus on a gothic mansion, and the vampire that haunts it is just as creepy as the castle that housed Christopher Lee in 1958. From the makeup to the lighting, the vampire doll is eerie in all the right ways, and it's all tied together by a mystery that's just begging to be unraveled. There's even a character that bears some similarities to Jonathan Harker in that he stays the night in the titular mansion before he encounters our bloodsucker for the first time. And like other Hammer horror films, the vampire doll uses its musical score to punctuate a scare in classic film fashion. However, when it comes to the tokusatsu aspects of the vampire doll, these special effects are very simple and very straightforward. And frankly, we won't see any remarkable things until the very next film, The Lake of Dracula. Known in Japan as Cursed Mansion, The Bloodthirsty Eye, Lake of Dracula improves upon the formula set by the vampire doll in almost every aspect. The film's lush and idyllic camera work creates this stark contrast once it's juxtaposed with the gothic evil that lurks within the mansion nearby. The focus of our story is Akiko, a woman who's on holiday with her sister near her old stomping grounds by said mansion, when out of nowhere, a coffin mysteriously appears, inciting all sorts of strange and deadly occurrences across town. What makes Lake of Dracula an improvement over the previous film is how it lays out the scares when it comes to its night scenes. Believe it or not, a great deal of the vampire doll takes place in the daytime, but that's totally not the case when it comes to this entry. The scares either happen when someone's home alone at night, or around a coffin, or in a morgue. And this time around, our titular vampire is both tall and otherworldly. That's right folks, our vampy villain is none other than legendary character actor Shin Kishida, who you've all seen in Return of Ultraman and Sun Vulcan, and he kills it here, literally. His heinous actions and motives are a mystery throughout the movie, and in my opinion, that makes him all the more menacing. In addition, the film's titular mansion is right out of a Hammer horror film in that it's dark, gothic, and massive with foreboding shadows, old paintings, and creepy doors to boot. But what makes this tokusatsu, aside from Shin Kishida of course, are the effects when it comes to the film's finale, which I won't spoil. You see, in every Hammer Dracula film, one of the biggest highlights for probably every single Hammer Dracula film is that there's always a scene where Vlad basically gets either resurrected or destroyed. And in both Lake of Dracula and Evil of Dracula, these finales are recreated to full effect. However, I'm blurring these because I want y'all to watch these films yourself, so no spoilers from me. Speaking of which, let's talk about the last film of the trilogy, The Evil of Dracula. The consensus that I'm seeing online is that Michio Yamamoto's last film of this trilogy is his best received, and honestly, I can kind of see why. Known as the Bloodthirsty Rose in Japan, The Evil of Dracula builds on the triumph of Lake of Dracula by its world building. Our hero is the newest principal of an all-girls high school, which feels right at home with Hammer classics like Brides of Dracula or The Vampire Lovers. However, trouble's afoot once the dorms are plagued by a mysterious disease. Luckily for our hero, he gets a lay of the land thanks to character actor Kuniya Tanaka, who plays a doctor that sets the stage when it comes to rumors about a vampire. But once the bodies start dropping, it's time for our hero to act, because if he doesn't, he's fanged for good. Shin Kishida returns as our villainous vampire, but this time he has a lot more to do here, and he's fantastic. Suave and sickly, he's doing double duty here, but that's going into spoiler territory, so I'll stop there. In addition, The Evil of Dracula has more toku effects thanks to some squibs, fangs, props, and yes, the ever-reliable vampire disintegration scene, which is the best from this entire trilogy. The one thing that sets Evil of Dracula apart from the previous two films is Kuniya Tanaka himself. He's a folksy physician with a heart of gold, and I've always seen him as a stand-in for Peter Cushing's Van Helsing. Sure, he doesn't fight like Peter, but he acts as this wise, world-building foil that shares a strong interest in the paranormal. Akiko's boyfriend in Lake of Dracula has got the brains and the brawn, but he's too damn youthful. And when it comes to the vampire doll, I'll stop right there to avoid some spoilers. Just know that when it comes to The Evil of Dracula, Dr. Shimomura is a neat guy, so look out for him. And speaking of looks, The Evil of Dracula looks stunning in HD. The dorms are full of shadows, the gothic horror of the mansion is the best it's ever been for this trilogy, but the air of mystery surrounding Shin Kishida is non-existent because he's more direct in his evilness, if that makes sense. In Lake of Dracula, Shin Kishida was the mystery, while in this film, there is a stronger focus on unraveling his backstory. So if you're interested in a vampire film that's got more lore baked into its veins, give Evil Dracula a try. So there you have it, Toho's Bloodthirsty Trilogy. On the surface, these films are light on suits and drivers, but in my opinion, these still adhere to the craft of special effects filmmaking. The gore, makeup, and puppets are awesome, fitting right in with the gothic horror trends of that era. And like many Hammer Dracula films, the villain's mansion plays a key role in establishing a dreadful and oppressive atmosphere. To the younger folks watching, it won't seem that way at first, but if you sit back and allow yourself to soak in the entirety of the picture, you'll see what I mean. But that brings up another issue that bears some mention here. Even though each film in the trilogy is under 90 minutes, it moves carefully and refuses to rush the mystery. These aren't boring films by any means, but events will unravel at their own pace, and the workmanlike approach to how the Bloodthirsty Trilogy is filmed won't yield any Dutch angles, CGI, fast cuts, or Aaron Sorkin exchanges. Just remember that this trilogy is a product of the 1970s that took inspiration from films that were made in the 50s and 60s. Speaking of which, there will be a few things that will irk you as a modern viewer. Our hero in Evil of Dracula is a bit too cozy when he interacts with the students. Dr. Yamaguchi from the Vampire Doll is a scene stealer, but keep an eye on him towards the end. And there's some possible essay in the Lake of Dracula. This kind of cringe was normalized for films of the 70s, but that shouldn't stop you from engaging with and critiquing the art you consume. With all that said, I still think Toku fans, both young and old, will still get a kick out of the Bloodthirsty Trilogy. The films are short, they're full of familiar faces, and act as gateway horror flicks with a chilling, gothic twist. And if you couple that with the Hammer-inspired visuals, what you get are 3 horror movies that are grounded by the power of practical effects. So if you're looking for some Showa era scares, then sink your teeth into the Bloodthirsty Trilogy tonight.